Our reading today comes again from Mark's Gospel. We've had the tale told here in Mark's Gospel of the triumphant entry into Jerusalem and the challenge that Jesus puts down to the religious authorities by doing the right thing, by going into the temple and trying to reset people onto what was really important, which was their relationship with God and not the trappings of organised religion. But it is a challenge nonetheless. And of course, because all of the people were amazed at what Jesus taught and that he persisted to do that in the temple was obviously a source of major irritation. So we had that experience of three types of religious leaders coming to Jesus posing difficult questions. And then last week we heard how a scribe came to ask a more sort of general question really about the importance of the commandments and which is the greatest. And Jesus, of course, responding with those two verses from Deuteronomy and Leviticus. So this week, at the end of all of that testing and all of that questioning, now Jesus speaks to the large crowd who were there. As he taught them, this is from Mark chapter 12 and verses 38 to 44. Mark 12, 38 to 44. As he taught them, he said, "Watch out for the teachers of the law, who like to walk around in their long robes and be greeted with respect in the marketplace, who choose the reserved seats in the synagogues and the best places at feasts. They take advantage of widows and rob them of their homes, and then they make a show of saying long prayers. Their punishment will be all the worse." As Jesus sat near the temple treasury, he watched the people as they dropped in their money. Many rich men dropped in a lot of money. Then a poor widow came along and dropped in 2 little copper coins, worth about a penny. He called his disciples together and said to them, "I tell you, this poor widow put more in the offering box than all the others, for the others put in what they had to spare from their riches, but she, poor as she is, put in all she had. She gave all she had to live on." So, a stinging retort for false pride, particularly in the sense of those who lead and those who direct and those who are meant to bring others into an experience of the living God, but who in fact forget all that and trade it in for the trappings of normal life, the importance that other people ascribe to them, the uniforms that they wear which bring them respect, the advantages that their positions bestow upon them. So all of those things are really key, of course, for all of us in our religious pursuits to make sure that we don't get puffed up with our own pride and that we don't forget that everything is for the glory of God and that whatever one does, whatever one says, it's all about that. And that is the most important thing. And there's a beautiful episode there too, of course, with the widow's offering. Jesus making it plain to the disciples, of course, that it is the motivation behind things that matters, not the show. People could spare money, and so it cost them nothing to give it. But to offer everything, obviously, betrays an inner spirituality, an inner depth of awareness, a thankfulness, a gratefulness, an awareness of how blessed one is, coupled, of course, with an extravagant response, an extravagance measured in cost, in this case, of course, as well. So, true motivation, and that's what Jesus has been talking about through all of these verses in Mark's Gospel. The true relationship with God, which is personal and real and intense and can be found within organised religion and can be found within the structures that people put together and can be experienced through all sorts of lovely people who take part within the structures of a church or an organised faith. Of course it can, and it's where it should be. But of course, our organised religions are open to everyone. Quite right too. But of course, everyone includes you and me, with all of our foibles, with all of our weirdnesses, with all of our prejudices, with all of our particular views of how things ought to be, and with all of us running the risk of losing the plot. Jesus comes again and again and again throughout the gospel stories to tell people the good news that the kingdom of heaven is near. It's at the end of their nose. It's right there. It's there for the grasping. And there are no laws or particular things one has to do or regulations one ought to obey. It's all about your relationship with God and opening yourself up to the God who is there before you, available and real. And for us in a post-resurrection age, of course, through the Spirit of Jesus, God is with us always and everywhere. And I love that example of Jesus sitting in the temple courtyard with his disciples and seeing things and reflecting on those things and reflecting on them theologically. Many people could have sat there in the court of women, which was the place in the temple where women were allowed to go no further, whereas the men could proceed into an inner court. Many people could sit there and just idly while away the time, look at people, admire the clothes, make judgments about them, pass comments on them, etc. Jesus sees what happens and ascribes a religious, a theological reflection on what is being seen. And that woman's offering, small and unobserved, easy to miss, contains an incredible and deep truth about thankfulness and generosity and extravagance based on an awareness of love received. And that's huge. And in some ways, that's kind of our message for today, is to be those people who are awake enough, alive enough, aware enough of the world around us to see God in action, God in people, God in others, God in the motivation behind people, God in the words people say, God in the kindness that is shown. The kingdom of heaven is made of those who know themselves to be loved by the God who made all things, and to work ceaselessly and often in hidden ways for the glory of God. So may all we do and say be motivated by that single desire to praise God for all that God has done for us in all we do and say.